So the 5 questions of worldview really help us understand our people a little bit better. They help us understand what they think and how they view the world, but it's also helpful to understand 4 levels of culture. Anthropologist Edward T. Hall was the first one to really come up with this model of culture as an iceberg, and missiologist Paul Hebert really draws on this a lot in his Transforming Worldviews. But culture is like an iceberg. There are elements that you see, and then there are other parts that are underwater. And for us to be effective missionaries, we have to make sure that the gospel goes to the deepest part of their worldview. So, if this is culture here, our first level of culture are cultural products. Oh, there's a C in there. Cultural products. So these are things like if you've heard of 5 F's, or just the most basic, obvious sensory experiences that you can have in a culture. Things like food, festivals, family, to some degree faith, although that gets into a deeper level. And between each of these layers, I don't want you to think of these as set and dry. It's really a gradient from the top all the way to the bottom along a continuum here. So these are the things that are the most external. And then these are the most internal and implicit things, parts of culture. So up at the very top you have cultural products, clothes, food, festival, families, faith. That kind of gets down into our second level right here, which is beliefs. Or I would say belief systems. So what religion do they claim to believe? In the context that I was working in, I was working with Jula people in West Africa, and they say to be Jula is to be a Muslim. But when you scratch the surface of that, it's really more of just what they say they believe. On a lower level is what they actually value. So the Jula people would say that they are Muslims, but they also come from a fear-power social setting. So at the end of the day, when they're afraid of something, they're probably going to turn to the witch doctor. So truly their values are deeper down. So they would say that they're a Muslim, but a lot of them would also say, oh yeah, Marie, you're a better Muslim than we are, just because I actually practiced my faith. So you can see how the external levels of culture are up here and internal levels of culture down here. And then at the deepest aspect of a person's culture is their worldview. As you see it in the word, it's the way they view the world. These are really the things that are the hardest to understand, because most people, even within their own culture, don't understand their worldview. It's like asking a fish to describe what water is. They only know water. So to really understand their worldview, often they either have to get outside of their worldview or really come in contact with something that's very different. And this is where the 5 questions of worldview that Chris went over in the last video are going to be truly helpful to understand these aspects, the deepest levels that only philosophers and anthropologists think to ask. Who are we? What is truth? Where did we come from? All of these questions are going to come from the worldview. And when the gospel truly engages someone's worldview, everything else is going to fall into place. So the problem some missionaries can have, or have had in the past, is to just address these things from a Christian worldview, or try to change them to look like us. But instead, we need to engage the gospel at a worldview, at the deepest, most internal, implicit worldview level.